which is why even to today, Planned Parenthood, the leading killer of unborn lives and certainly leading killer of Black lives, doesn't offer charity. What they do offer is a warped sense of humanity that somehow eliminating people who they feel don't deserve to live is something that leads to freedom. And Margaret Sanger was the one who basically created this sort of mindset, this warped mindset.
Hi again, everybody. Mike Andrews, Aaron Baer, David Mahan joining you for another episode of the Narrative Podcast. It's that time of year when we're rarely all in the same space at the same time. I know you guys have
12 minutes.
have been doing some traveling lately, and good to be able to sit down and actually talk about kind of a slow news week. When I think back to the last time we were together, we had almost too much to get through.
Oh, yeah. I'll take the slow news week compared to the what it has been, where it's been fast and furious.
It's a little better pace. That's where it feels more like summer. But still, some big news that we wanted to talk about in that Attorney General Dave Yost this week held a press conference. You were part of it, Aaron, to talk about the status of the EdChoice lawsuit. The ruling a couple weeks ago was that EdChoice is unconstitutional in the opinion of a Franklin County Common Pleas Court judge. The Attorney General wanted to be very clear this week that he is going to file a brief against that, and also to reiterate the fact that EdChoice is still the law of the land in Ohio, because that's been a major point of confusion.
Yeah, he's filing his appeal. Actually, by the time this is posted, the appeal will have been filed. I think this lawsuit is the definition of lawfare that we're seeing from the left right now, where it really, big picture, has virtually no chance of succeeding. Right, we're not concerned about the nature of this lawsuit, about EdChoice going away because of this lawsuit or anything like that. But the schools, the teachers unions, and these public school districts have brought this lawsuit forward really to scare families off from using the program, right? And they very specifically chose this Judge Page in Franklin County, where she has no chance of really being unelected from or beaten in an election because of this decision. And she wrote this really sweeping 40-some page decision blocking EdChoice from being in effect. Ultimately, she blocked her own. She stayed her own decision while the appeal goes on. So that's the good news, is that even though we lost in Franklin County Court, and quite frankly, we're probably going to lose in the 10th District Court of Appeals. We know they chose this area because they'll win at these first two levels. But ultimately, when this gets up to the Supreme Court, we know we're going to win. But it's just the peak of how the left tries to use the courts. Not necessarily to have justice be done or have the rule of law upheld, but to inflict their political will and honestly kind of, I hate to say it, but kind of terrorize families to thinking that their kid's going to get kicked out of their school.
I was in there, and it's kind of sick. Number one, the manipulation is taking place, right? It's crazy. But two, how do you make a public message out of, and we've got, 100 and some thousand students that are taking advantage of these programs, and we're saying, no, we want to maintain our monopoly on education, even though that monopoly every year or two is proven to be failing, right? Yep. In our largest cities, 77% of kids can't read in fourth or when they graduate proficiently. And so I just don't understand the messaging here. It's just pure manipulation. And to keep a government program, going.
Well, and that's to me, at the press conference, those were my remarks, which is, it's insane that for these school districts, instead of asking the question, why are people not taking our free product?
Yeah,
right.
Like they could walk to this school.
They can walk to this school. It's cheaper. It's easier. It's faster for their kids to come here, but families are driving across town, paying money on top of the voucher in many cases to not be in our school, right? There's no self-evaluation on that, and you keep hearing, like, Columbus City Schools always say, in the brief the judge wrote, in the decision the judge wrote in Franklin County, these schools are failing because of EdChoice. They're just so underfunded. They can't afford teachers. Their buildings are falling apart. Columbus Public Schools is a $1.28 billion corporation.
Yeah.
$1.28 billion every year. and they can't figure out. And they're, by the way, 40 years ago, there were 117,000 kids in Columbus Public Schools. Today, there's 42,000. It's a large school district, but there's 42,000 kids. And they can't figure out how to teach these kids to read. And they have the audacity to file this lawsuit to say they're underfunded.
$20,000 to $28,000 per student in some of these large cities. It's and they can't make it work. They can't teach a third grader how to read.
Right.
And at this press conference, you hear the type of questions that the media is asking. And I just want to say, go watch the press conference on YouTube for yourself to really understand
Matt
this.
Huffman crushed it.
Matt Huffman dismantled their arguments, and yet they still come back with the, well, why don't you care about public schools? Why won't you fund public schools? And he's got the receipts of, we've given them more money than ever.
Oh.
They're producing worse results than ever. This is not turning away from public schools. It's just providing options.
But then he clapped back and he was like, and if you keep pushing, basically, we're going to make sure that y'all actually fund religious education.
That's right. Oh, that's
based on the Constitution.
I don't know if you saw this. So Matt Huffman is right that not only does the Ohio Constitution allow for these for private schools, the Ohio Constitution actually requires the funding of religious education. And you probably can't see this on the video, but at one point Matt Huffman says, what I don't know, really the reality is this lawsuit's coming from the public because, first off, this lawsuit is completely ridiculous because you have public school entities taking money from taking taxpayer dollars to sue the state. So it's the state suing the state to get more money from the state. That's what this is. The public schools
Stateception.
It really is. It's nonsense, right? It's a hot pocket within a hot pocket. There's a deep track. Thank you. Who is that?
Jim Gaffigan.
Jim Gaffigan. That's a deep track. Jim Gaffigan.
Sam,
Sorry.
can we cut that?
No, that's gold. That's gold. That's staying in.
Anyway, I had a point there I was making. No. So, Matt Huffman's like, this lawsuit is absurd. It's, there's no argument here that we can't be funding these. He said, honestly, you look in places like Southeast Ohio where there are no private school, there are no Christian schools, just because there hasn't been a demand yet. That's what we're working on at CCV and OSEN. He said, but the Constitution actually requires us to fund religious schools and make it available. He said, it's weird to me that why isn't there a lawsuit on that right now? Right. And Dave Yost literally looked at me and said, don't. And I said, I don't know, that's interesting. So let's put a pin in that one. But yeah, I mean, again, the other thing too, to your point, Mike, the media's question, there's one reporter, I think he was from one of the legislative news services, asked the very tickling the ears sounding question that's actually very stupid, where he said, why is it fair that the public schools have to accept everybody, but the private schools can choose who comes to their schools, right? Which, again, number one, the public schools are not a victim. Since when do we talk about a government agency like it's a victim? It was the same type of question that another reporter asked Matt Huffman on. Shouldn't you're the state legislature? Shouldn't you be defending the public schools? Shouldn't you be supporting the public schools? And Matt Huffman said, "My concern is not a state entity. My concern is Ohio's kids."
Right.
That's what this is all about. And that's the same type of thing. Like, isn't it unfair to the public schools? What does fairness matter to the public schools? What matters is the kids. How are the kids doing? And if the public schools are one option for helping achieve the goal of kids being educated. And no, by the way, it's the families that are making the choice of where to send their kids. That's how this program is structured. The money actually goes to the families, not to the private schools, and then the families decide where the money goes. And the private schools just have the ability to decide, hey, this is who we are. That's actually what makes, I'll just speak for myself as somebody who sends his kids to a Christian school. Like, what makes us be able to have the choice is this is something different. If we make the private schools be exactly the same as the public schools, that's not choice. My family then doesn't have the ability to say, I want to send my kids here, right? I want to send my kids to a school where it is a Christian environment, where the teachers are Christians, the families are Christians. And I get it's totally cool that other people don't want to send their kids there. And if you want to send if somebody wants to make an LGBT school, they can. There's really no reason for that because they can just send them to public schools.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And to act like the public schools have not had some manner of deciding who attends is ridiculous when you think of the number of years where the more wealthy districts, the more higher performing districts have just been able to say, no, we're not taking you.
No, that's
about open enrollment.
Exactly. No, that's the most racist schools are the public schools.
Right.
Like, go look at the Fordham chart of 85% of Ohio public schools have open enrollment. That means if you don't live in that school district, you can send your kids. You can send your kid to that school.
Redlining.
But the only schools that don't have open enrollment are all of the suburban schools surrounding the urban course, right? So Olentangy, they do not accept open enrollment, right? And they don't want the riffraff from Columbus, right? Indian Hills and Cincinnati, they do not have open enrollment, right?
Racist.
It literally, it's like it is the definition of redlining. And for the media to sit there and say, oh, these schools have to accept everybody. No, they do not.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Well, so I encourage you, watch the press conference, read one article reporting on it, and tell me if you think it's fair in any way, shape, or form, because they missed the mark of what was going on there. And speaking of missing the mark, Stephen Colbert is going to be paying the price for just being so far left.
He's so gone out of his
And
So what did he say, right? Because I was out working, right? I don't know what y'all are doing. You're watching TV.
It was that one day, a week that you were actually in the office.
12 noon watching Stephen Colbert news. What did he actually say, though?
So the big picture was there was a story that came out from CBS that the Late Show, right, the old David Letterman show, has been losing $40 million a year.
Wow.
Right. And he, like Stephen Colbert, gets paid $20 million. Right. They have a staff of 200 employees. They get they get the highest ratings. Right. This is what Stephen Colbert and all these Jon Stewart and all these guys were complaining about. Oh, it's the highest rated late night show compared to Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel. Right.
Which is funny.
Yeah, which is not funny and has just been hemorrhaging audience. And they get 2.2 million people on average per episode. Comparison, I remember hearing Megyn Kelly talk about this. Megyn Kelly has a staff of 6 and gets 18 million viewers per episode on her YouTube show. And so CBS has just pulled the plug on Colbert effective, I think, May of next year.
Yeah, he's got the final year of his contract, and then they're pulling the plug.
Exactly. And so he's, what they're all saying, in the background of all of this, CBS's parent company is trying to close a deal with Skydance, another company on like an $8 billion merger, and the Trump administration has to approve all of that. So that's what Colbert and everybody is saying, oh, well, this is because they're trying to appease Trump. Instead of just the lack of self-reflection, and again, it's funny to say this, once again, sitting in the Columbus Dispatch's former building, the lack of self-reflection of saying, hey, this show, used to be one of the biggest things in pop culture, and you've driven it into the ground because you've just told more than half the country they're ignorant Nazis. And you wonder why your show's getting canceled.
And to act like this is just out of left field or completely out of the blue. Like, I was a pretty regular Letterman watcher when he was on the Late Show. Loved it. It was one of my favorite shows. And
it was hilarious.
Yeah. And I liked Colbert when he was on Comedy Central.
Report,
Colbert Report, when he was a Daily Show reporter. Like, he was legitimately funny. And it's like the moment that he took over that slot on CBS, it was nonstop leftist propaganda that was going for clapter and agree with me, don't laugh with me, as I make these very, arrogant political points. It was insufferable.
It was the looking down on all of America. Right, that was just the thing that made the show not enjoyable. Right, like it's why I think, at least the men in the room that actually like watching sports instead of sitting up in trees.
No venison for you.
Yeah, right. It's like the ESPN went through that little bit of a phase a few years ago where everything was just a political message. It's like, guys, I'm not here for this, right? I can turn on Fox, I can turn on CNN if that's what I'm here for, but the politicalization of everything just made it not fun.
But it's like, to me, it's a wise move. It's like you firing me and then blaming it on BLM.
Yeah.
Right? They knew this guy is trash, but what an opportunity to blame Trump.
Right.
And get more news, spin from it. I think it's a great strategy.
Yeah, no, and the most important thing, I think it's twofold. One, everyone has known these shows don't work anymore because of how far left they've gone. Their audience.
Just preaching.
It's just preaching. I don't think I was surprised to hear they're losing $40 million a year. I figured they weren't doing well, but the vibe shift aspect of this is these corporations are no longer terrified of Stephen Colbert or a silly Jon Stewart rant. That's just ridiculously unfunny, and they're actually willing now to just be capitalists, right? And just say, this is losing a lot of money, I'm out.
And if you need further proof of what we're talking about, who was the featured guest the night that Colbert announced this?
I didn't see.
Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff. Like, this is exactly what we're talking about.
Why Adam Schiff on a comedy show?
Exactly, on the late night show.
Right. Like that, it just proves the point. The lack of self-awareness of like, oh, we're not too political. We're just being canceled for saying the right. No, you are a platform for the Democratic Party and the farthest left wing of the Democratic Party.
I mean, again, like, think back to when Leno or Letterman was on. Like, the only politician they would have on once every few years would be the president. The idea of bringing in some like obscure California ultra, like the farthest of the left Democrat senator is nonsense. You just wouldn't you wouldn't ever do that before. And now this is, their big guest for the week, right?
Well, I think we ranted a little bit longer than we intended on that, but good stuff.
It is.
Positive things in the media. I want to talk about this Scotty Scheffler Nike ad and just seeing him win the British Open in that scene of his toddler coming up to the 18th green, and while he's holding the claret jug, like, he puts down the trophy and he picks up his kid. Like, what more of a picture of the beauty of fatherhood could you ask for than that?
Yeah, well, I was just in Indianapolis earlier this week and David was in. David got to go to the Orlando, Florida conference. I had to go to the Indianapolis conference.
The Ritz.
So, yeah, he was at the Ritz. I was at the Marriott. But good for you, man. I'm glad you're getting to.
Maybe he'll stop complaining.
Exactly. But I was with all of the other state leaders, and they asked me to share on the Hope in a Future report and the Family Structure Index. And it's the hardest thing about this whole conversation of how do we restore marriage and family. And honestly, things like Scotty Scheffler being with, ultra rich guy, right? He won $3+ million over 4 days, right? So it's a good hourly rate. And there he is with the wife of his youth, with his newborn son, and just showing the happy, and also having his press conferences talking about, hey, winning is really an empty hole if that's what you put your value in, and talking about the sincerity of his faith, but really showing the beauty of that of marriage and family does way more culturally than any individual law we can pass. And then the kicker in all of it is the same company that 2 years ago was putting out ads with dudes in sports bras.
That was a big moment for David. That was
exactly. Nike.
Why are you always talking about my underwear? Exactly. Like, on air.
Right, exactly.
Like, this is one time.
Yeah, one time. So too many times.
Yeah, too many.
One too many. But Nike doing an ad with Scotty with his kid, again, that just shows the power of Christians being in influential spots and being outspoken about their faith. Right, it really goes so far.
And if you need help being outspoken about your faith, we've got some fall events coming up here at CCV that are going to encourage you and inspire you. We haven't talked about the Essential Summit, I don't think, yet on the show.
I know.
Bringing back crazy. The conference again this year.
It's quickly becoming my favorite event.
Yeah.
Last year was amazing.
Yeah, so don't miss this year. The theme is going to be restoring the roots, reviving the American family, tying in a lot of these fatherhood and family themes that we've been talking about. And Willie Robertson's going to be our keynote. We've got Rosaria Butterfield, Carl Truman's coming.
Yep.
This is really shaping up to be another great day.
Cam Babb, former Ohio State Buckeye captain.
David Mahan.
Wow. Nice. Crickets.
Nice.
No, but it is one. With the event, we had our first ever one last year, and we sold out. We didn't know how it was going to go, and it was a blast. But also too, we do 3 galas a year, and I know we have to announce that as well on here. But at the galas, we really have time for one main keynote speaker, right? We have time for like the Willie Robertson type, right, where this is the speaker that we're bringing in. But then there's all of these other speakers that maybe aren't as well known, but at least for us around CCV, have really formed and shaped the way we think about things, right? So that was part of the reason why we launched the podcast, was so that we could bring some of these other voices forward. Yeah. But people like, I've been following Rosaria Butterfield since she wrote her first book, Secret Thoughts of an Unlikely Convert, when she was the Rutgers professor, Syracuse professor, who was in a lesbian relationship doing like queer studies and walked out of that life for a life in Christ. And so to have her being able to come and share is just special. People like Delano Squires. Yep. Again, like if we were to hold an event just with Delano, we wouldn't get 1,000 people at that event. But having a venue like this where we can have voices like him in there too, that people need to hear, that people should hear, is what I'm so excited about. And we have all the tracks. We just added a track for pregnancy centers this year. David B. Wright's coming to speak at that track. It really is just going to be a great event.
And it'll be followed by the March for Life the next day, which is going to be another great event. Hopefully by now our listeners know all about that. We've done it, 4 or 5 years now.
Exactly. And you gotta get your school there. That's the March for Life. Every other event we do at CCV, we always are like, hey, this has gotta this is at least got to break even for us in order for us to afford, because these events can be pretty expensive bringing in these speakers. The March for Life event is the one event we do at a loss every year. This is why we go and raise support, but we do it because it's about passing the baton of the pro-life movement on to the next generation. And the crowd is almost always more than half high school or college students who drive in from which is very different than all the other lefty protesters you see across the street, which is almost straight boomers, all of David's kids over there.
Shots fired.
No offense to our boomer listener, we love you, but this is the March for Life is a lot of students. If your school wants to come down, be sure you reach out and we'll help coordinate getting buses there, all that stuff.
Yeah, and you teed up the gala in Cleveland on Friday, September 26th. So
beforehand, yes.
This is
my
now
anniversary.
Going back.
Sorry, Maria. We will make it up to you. That's the.
Oh, Taco Bell for you, Maria.
Taco Bell. Yes, this is our anniversary.
Charlie Kirk
yes.
is going to be the keynote speaker, which is just amazing, and a lot of buzz and excitement around that announcement, which we made last week, I think.
Yeah, man. Charlie has just become one of the most important voices in culture, and it's been really awesome to watch Charlie, start TPUSA. I mean, I remember when Turning Point came out, it was a really hard Republican organization, and Charlie's always just been a great speaker. But I feel like over the last, 5-10 years, you've seen Charlie just become such a strong faith leader. And the way he speaks to the importance of Christianity in America is, the only other person I can think that is like him in that is J.D. Vance. And so I'm so excited to have Charlie, and to have, I think we've gone Tucker Carlson, Kayleigh McEnany, and Charlie Kirk now up in Cleveland. That's been really, really big.
So if you need more details on any of these events that we talked about, ccv.org, we've got landing pages for all those. You can get your tickets, and hopefully we'll see you at some of those events. If not all of them, it'd be great for you to join us there. Well, we're going to hit pause real quick and then jump back in with our interview with Ryan Bomberger. David and I had the chance to chat with him about all of his work and his story, and just a fantastic interview. Hope you enjoyed it. It's coming up next on The Narrative. Hey, Narrative listeners. You know, Christians in the marketplace today face more unique and challenging threats than ever before. Businesses are following woke capitalism, chambers of commerce are beholden to social justice, and secular activists are chipping away Christians' First Amendment rights. As Ohio's only Christian chamber of commerce, the Christian Business Partnership stands in the gap to advocate for, to educate, and to celebrate Christian business owners. Joining the partnership also allows businesses to provide their employees with healthcare insurance, workers' compensation, and exclusive banking and educational discounts. To find out more and to join, go to cbpohio.org. That's cbpohio.org. Welcome back to The Narrative. Mike Andrews, David Mahan, and we are joined now by Ryan Bomberger, who's an Emmy award-winning creative professional, international public speaker, columnist, and author. He and his wife co-founded the Radiance Foundation, a life-affirming nonprofit that illuminates that every human life has a purpose. Ryan and his wife have 4 children, and we're so grateful for your time joining us on The Narrative today. Thanks so much, Ryan.
Hey, it's great to be here with you.
Well, just to get us started, you've got a great story. Could you tell us a little bit of your background and help our audience get to know you better?
Sure. I grew up in Pennsylvania on a farm with your typical American family of 15. I have 6 brothers, 6 sisters, and 10 out of 13 kiddos were adopted. I was the first one, so it obviously went well. And every year there was a new flavor added to the family, to the Bomberger family. And growing up in that kind of adoptive situation where we have such a mixture, really diverse family, black, white, mixed like I am, Native American, Vietnamese, able, disabled, adopted as babies, adopted as toddlers, adopted as teens out of the foster care system, just a group of kids that many times the world just writes off because they were supposedly unplanned. Therefore, they're going to be unwanted. My parents shattered that myth. I'm also one of those exceptions cases when people talk about abortion. It's the inevitable go-to. Well, what about rape? Well, that's me. I was conceived in rape, but I was adopted in love, and I'm forever grateful to an incredibly courageous birth mom who could have chosen a different route, but instead gave me the gift of life and the gift of adoption. So that's why I'm particularly passionate about defending the most marginalized among the marginalized, because that was me.
And you've had a great career as a creative professional, producing a lot of content through the Radiance Foundation, and one of your most recent books is called Not Equal: Civil Rights Gone Wrong. And as I was flipping through this to prepare for our chat with you today, Ryan, I got to tell you, I love the format of this book because I love the memes that are in there, kind of the social media sharing graphics. And then you not only put those in there, but you put the story and more of the data and background that really went into creating the memes. And I think this is a dynamite book. It's very dynamic and very engaging.
Well, thank you. It was born out of pain.
Yeah.
It was born out of, and maybe we can get into this a little later, but it was birthed out of my experience being sued by the NAACP.
So the NAACP.
That was not who I was expecting to be at the end of that sentence there. Come on, man. Tell us more.
Okay, so first of all, I did forget to mention that a huge part of my story, of course, is my amazing wife, Bethany, and we have 4 kiddos, 2 of whom were adopted. And when we started the Radiance Foundation back in 2009, I just thought everyone was going to love us because my wife's story of being a single mom and being resilient, even though she was pressured by the biological father to abort that child, whose name is Radiance, the reason for the name of our organization, the Radiance Foundation. And I thought they would love my story, being adopted into a family of 15 and, just overcoming and living in a family that has overcome so many obstacles. But that wasn't the case. In this particular situation with this book, Not Equal: Civil Rights Gone Wrong, when Bethany and I had started the Radiance Foundation, we took on 2 of the, I joke about it, the easiest topics possible. Let's take on race and abortion. We were in Atlanta at the time. That's where we had begun our family, and we launched a billboard campaign called TooManyAborted.com, and we highlighted the issue of abortion's impact in the Black community. And so we put up 80 billboards, thanks to Georgia Right to Life, that actually gave us the billboard space. And we called out the racism, the past and present racism of Planned Parenthood, and called them out. That campaign continued to other major cities across the country, including LA and San Francisco, those conservative bastions out there. And we were denounced by the ACLU, denounced by Planned Parenthood, and denounced by the NAACP that called our campaign, a campaign highlighting the devastation of abortion in the Black community, called our campaign racist. And so I wrote an article, being the factivist that I am, and I called out the NAACP, a group that I grew up revering all my life until that point. And I called them out because of their radical pro-abortion positions, policies, and rhetoric. And so I called the op-ed the National Association for the Abortion of Colored People. And they sued me. And they sued the Radiance Foundation. I'm brown, but apparently it didn't stop the NAACP from suing me for exercising one of my most basic civil rights, which is free speech. 2 years in federal court, which was absolutely insane. And I'll just, make it really brief. They lost. They lost at the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, Virginia, and they were not able to silence us. But they were almost successful. They succeeded at the first federal level in a court in Norfolk, Virginia, and they were defeated on appeal.
You should do a movie about that, Ryan, just so people can get the facts. The thing I love about not equal, civil rights gone wrong. When it comes to life, we have a lot of different angles we can hit it from, right? The eugenics angle, the science angle, the former abortionist angle, the Molech angle from scripture. But the civil rights angle, you don't hear a whole lot of people talking about that, right? Like you don't hear a whole lot of people talking about, in the 60s when Planned Parenthood was trying to go into certain communities, it was the Black Panthers who stood against them. You don't hear about Jesse Jackson, my favorite pro-life speaker, being on National Right to Life, speaking circuit. You just don't hear about like the Fannie Lou Hamers. And I hear that when you speak. Can you really break down the civil rights angle of this whole abortion issue?
Well, yeah, it's just bizarre to see a civil rights movement, which became a civil rights industry, really veering away from actually defending and protecting Black lives. You've got the NAACP, for instance, who has announced solidarity with Planned Parenthood. And you look back and like, wait a minute, of all the causes of death or harm, oppression, persecution, whatever you may, you want to put into that basket against people of our complexion, abortion is the leading killer. It's the number one killer. In fact, when we launched this campaign, we were highlighting how in New York City, the home of Planned Parenthood, more Black babies are aborted than born alive. That exists still today, many, many years after our first campaigns. For every 1,000 born alive, 1,012 are aborted. Yet every civil rights organization, I should say every historic civil rights organization, National Urban League, NAACP, the National Legal Council of Women, the list goes on and on. They all are radically pro-abortion. I would say part of it is due to a complete loss of a biblical worldview for anyone who led these organizations. What a lot of people don't realize is a number of our civil rights icons were actually supportive of Planned Parenthood, supportive of abortion. Obviously not Fannie Lou Hamer, because she had no love for Planned Parenthood, but Rosa Parks. People don't want to hear this, but Rosa Parks ended up doing a fundraiser for Planned Parenthood, and it blows your mind. How, on one hand, can you say you cannot deny this group of people simply based on the complexion of their skin or the hue of their skin, the most basic civil rights, and then champion an organization that is the leading killer of those same people.
Especially in New York, right? New York, and I want you to talk about Margaret Sanger a little bit, because I think sometimes we assume that everybody, in our Christian audience might know, but they don't. And trust me, they don't, right? But in New York, the Planned Parenthood's name was the Margaret Sanger Center, which I don't know when you were going through your your legal battles and everything, but as late as 2020, matter of fact, it was in 2021, they finally decided to take her name off of the building because they admitted that she was a racist, that she was a eugenist. Matter of fact, it was Alexis McGill Johnson, who was the president of Planned Parenthood. She said this, and I quote, "We will no longer make excuses or apologize for Margaret Sanger's actions, but we can't simply call her racist, scrub her from our history, and move on. We must examine how we have perpetuated her harms over the last century, how we have perpetuated her harms that we don't want to admit in the Black community over the last century as an organization, an institution, and as individuals." Who was Margaret Sanger, and why did they end up taking her name off the building if she was such a queen and a hero?
Margaret Sanger was the founder, or you could consider her the mother of Planned Parenthood. She, back in 1916, I believe, established the first birth control clinic. Now, she was a eugenicist. She was a leading eugenicist. And what is amusing to me is how many people just dismiss her. Oh, she was so last century, and that was some old mindset. No, it's actually a prevailing mindset even today. But Margaret Sanger was a leading eugenicist, racist, willing to speak in front of the KKK and other groups like that. If you've ever read her autobiography, she had deep-seated racist ideas. She called huge swaths of the population dysgenic, meaning they weren't of the right birth, they weren't of the right stock, comparing human beings to human weeds all the time. And she particularly had an animus toward poorer blacks, who she said in numerous writings that reproduced recklessly. And she actually faulted charities. If you ever read her book, Pivot of Civilization, I'll tell you it was not my favorite read. But in Pivot of Civilization, she talks about the cruelty of charity, that charities enable stocks of certain people to flourish. And she actually criticized and denounced charities for, well, being charitable. She was not a charitable woman, which is why even to today, Planned Parenthood, the leading killer of unborn lives and certainly leading killer of Black lives, doesn't offer charity. What they do offer is a warped sense of humanity that somehow eliminating people who they feel don't deserve to live is something that leads to freedom. And Margaret Sanger was the one who basically created this sort of mindset, this warped mindset. And they distanced themselves from her, sort of, but you could change the name of your center. It doesn't change your DNA.
That's right.
Their DNA is exactly the same. People will say, well, Margaret Sanger lived back then and Planned Parenthood was different back then. Yeah, it was actually not as bad as it is now, because now they're killing over 400,000 human beings every year.
Listen, from 2012 to 2016, I know you know this, Ryan, but a lot of our listeners don't. And since we're talking about New York City and the beloved Margaret Sanger, according to the New York City Health Department, between those years, Black mothers aborted more babies than were born, right? So I think it was like 136,000 aborted and only about 118,000 born. So her legacy is living on, right? And so they can throw her under the bus, but the center is still there. And what they do in that place in terms of killing Black babies is still there. And Planned Parenthood, hey, you can feel any way you want about them, but our people have to stop embracing a narrative that says the way that we, go up in life, the way that we thrive is by killing our own offspring.
Yeah, it's a warped mindset. When Alexis McGill Johnson, which people need to understand, she's also mixed. She's Black and white as well, as far as her ethnicity, her genetic background. It doesn't make Planned Parenthood any less racist because someone who was brown is leading the organization. She has the same eugenic mindset. She makes nearly $1 million a year from profiting off of death. And so when they talk about they want to have this sort of reckoning, what are they reckoning with? They're still killing human lives, and disproportionately in Black communities. In New York City, it's still the same thing. The only demographic, by the way, where there are more induced deaths from abortion than any other, than those who are being live. No other demographic has that same sort of statistic. And if you look at the history of Planned Parenthood, this has all been by historic design. It has been a eugenic mindset that says somehow poor Blacks are to perpetually be the target. In fact, in an email a few years ago I got from Planned Parenthood, they said Black people are our base. In fact, the words verbatim were, the fact is Black people are our base. Of course they are. You've been targeting them for decades. You've been targeting us, I should say, for decades. It hasn't changed.
and I'm gonna shut up here because I can go on and on and on with this, and I think it's something that we need to talk more about, right? Because I think a lot of folks see Black folks just as a whole of always being pro-abortion or whatever, and I think our young people especially need to know the true history of our people. We were pro-life when folks were trying to kill us, real talk, and so.
Right.
Like, it just never made sense until here just recently. But there was Dr. Dolores Greer, and this is a civil rights activist from, again, New York City. And she made a statement that said this: "Let it be stated, Black women never demonstrated, demanded, or even requested the right to an abortion. We've been asking for the right to decent housing, the right to education, in fact, the right to health care. And all we've been given free of charge is the right to kill our unborn children." Right. In fact, we call that healthcare now. So the activists of the day, for the most part, were not on this stuff. The Black Panthers were not on this stuff. And Jesse Jackson and so many others were not on this stuff until the 80s, where, we kind of sold out. But anyway, we'll come back around.
There's so much to talk about.
Well, Ryan, I want to ask you, because you dropped a word in not too long ago that I find interesting. You said you were a factivist, and I really appreciate that term, because what we're really getting at here is getting past this virtue signaling activism that doesn't actually move the needle on anything, and giving people who feel deeply about an issue and are deeply convicted about an issue the truth that backs it up. So in your work, as you've sought to inform and equip people about the solid ground that their arguments can stand on, I'm just wondering, what are some of the key messages that you've seen really make an impact in people who want to be pro-life or care about these civil rights issues, or maybe have even changed the minds of an opponent?
Well, I do appreciate that I have a lot of opportunities to be able to share my story. And the thing about abortion is oftentimes it's in the abstract. So when you present someone with a tangible example of what it means when we embrace life, some of my messaging, some of the best things in life are unplanned. Or one of the things I say about my own story, I am the 1% that's used 100% of the time to justify abortion. Many people don't realize that rape-related pregnancies only comprise less than 1% of abortions nationwide. You wouldn't know that by hearing so much the rhetoric, because it almost seems like 99% of abortions are due to rape and incest. No, that's not the case. But as a creative, I've really been challenged to figure out how to address these things, how to address the issue of race and abortion. I can't tell you how many times I was called all kinds of things from mainstream media outlets, which is so crazy. Apparently I'm a white racist Southern bigot. I'm not Southern, and being Southern is not synonymous with being a bigot, by the way. Northerners can be just as bigoted. But I learned things about my mama I never knew. Anyway, I'm just saying that people will respond in such ridiculous ways, but when you put things into context, I found, especially when I'm speaking on college campuses, they really have no response to it. And I've spoken a lot at Harvard, Princeton, University of Notre Dame, Penn State, USC. The list goes on and on. And it was really important for me as someone who's obviously passionate about defending life, passionate about defeating racism. I wanted to know the context of issues. And so that's what I'm really passionate about doing. I know about, fatherlessness and welfare and poverty and all these things, so that even though we're talking primarily about the issue of abortion, I can talk about these inextricably tied things, these issues, and then come back to the core issue. But being a factivist, for me, is really satisfying when I see people who respond to the facts that are kind of intertwined with some of the emotional, personal stories. And that's really, for me, that's my approach to all of this, is fusing the emotional with the evidential.
In all of your work, and again, kudos to you, just the creativity in your messaging. I had the opportunity to see you on stage a couple of times presenting, and it's always different. It's a different feel, it's a different vibe and a tone when you're addressing audiences around this topic, which can be tough to deal with. Even for some of the folks that support you that may be in that audience, maybe they've had abortions and things. But when you're on those college campuses, What is the message that seems to resound the most to those who thought they were pro-choice, who may have ended up realizing they were pro-life when they left?
Well, I mean, I talk about my story, and honestly, it's so disarming. I can tell you, okay, Harvard, for instance, where I had some students tell me how much they, at the end of the event, how much they hated me before I arrived, but they had never heard a perspective like that. They had never seen information presented like that. I always do these multimedia keynotes because visually it brings to life the things that were so easy to reject in the abstract. So I think oftentimes it really is my story primarily. It is how I present it too, because I'm always trying to be hopeful in that, because you have something so heavy. But to have students come up to me afterward and say, "We hated you when you arrived, but you've changed my mind." I remember, in Florida at a college, was it University of Florida, I think. I had a student come up and say, I don't even know what to think anymore, because you just wrecked everything that I used to believe. And all I can do is credit God with that, because it is being that tangible example that often opens up avenues for me to people's hearts, because I represent that thing that makes it so easy to justify abortion. But then they're seeing a father and a husband and someone who's being able to be, from the world's perspective, I guess, successful at certain things. And it just makes it more real when I can reject some of the ridiculous rhetoric, the pro-abortion rhetoric. If you're unwanted, for instance, well, what does that even mean? What does unwanted mean? It doesn't mean that you're justified in doing anything you want against that individual, but yet that's what it's become. So I think really my story is kind of like that tip of the spear for a lot of these moments on these college campuses, and the fact that, look, as Christians, we need to be ready with the eternal answer, but we also need to be ready for these temporal answers, and too often we're not. And that's what I'm always determined. I'm always determined to be prepared, that I can address some of these peripheral things, and I find that there is a really positive response. Not from everybody. I'm still hated a lot on a lot of college campuses. I still get protested, smoke bombed, and out of auditoriums and whatever. But there is a shift, and I do see and hear responses that just to me signal, God, this is worth it. Even if one out of the 500 students or one out of the 100 students that showed up, whatever it is, even that one person's heart is changed. It's worth being hated.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, really, I see that as you're smashing the narrative with your own life story, because so much of what we see from the pro-abortion side is just based on emotional appeal, right? Yes. Like not the actual facts that you're bringing to the conversation. And so you're bringing the facts, but you're also, as you said, you're representative of the one emotional appeal that they've really, maybe not the one, but one of the main emotional appeals that they've grounded their argument in. And that's a paradigm shift, I would imagine.
Yes, that and adoption. I love when people do that. I mean, I love when people go to, well, what about adoption? I mean, are you going to adopt those kids? Well, actually, I adopted 2 out of my 4. And then it's like, well, that's not enough. I'm like, okay. My parents adopted 10. Is that enough? I mean, they don't, and the excuses are always the same. Actually, they're the same internationally. I've traveled to Ireland and to UK and other countries, and the rhetoric and the excuses, the justifications are always the same. But I do love the fact that, and there are times, I will tell you, I've had reporters say, well, are all these things about your life true? I'm like, I don't make up any of it. But I do love that God has kind of orchestrated this thing where I have the situations where I've had siblings who've dealt with certain kinds of addiction and certain kinds of abuse, and I've got adoption, and we've got this diverse family, and I'm mixed myself. I'm, white, black, and part Asian, and actually more Native American than Elizabeth Warren. So I'm all of these things, and I feel like God has kind of put this together for the ability to kind of break through in ways that maybe others can't. I mean, we all break through differently. It's not that I'm better, but I'm just saying that God has kind of put all these things all in a box, and it's like, okay, this is how you can express this and this, and to reach others and have things resonate differently because of what's inside of you and your experience.
You may not be prepared to really delve into this area, but recently the Supreme Court has had a couple serious blows. Actually, just not even just the Supreme Court, but Planned Parenthood has had a lot of serious blows. One, being defunded, I think $500 million, for the next year or so, and then I think just before that, the Supreme Court with the Medina versus Planned Parenthood case, where states now have, the legitimate right to deny, paying for abortions through Medicaid, or Planned Parenthood receiving those dollars. Do you have any thoughts on those, and are you encouraged by that or any other things that you're seeing right now on the national level related to life?
100%. In fact, I helped lead the rally at the Supreme Court for the Medina versus Planned Parenthood
Nice.
South Atlantic. And I was thrilled to see that 6-3 opinion. In fact, there have been a lot of 6-3 opinions. And of course, the three on the other side are always wrong about pretty much everything. But once in a while, actually, there are some unanimous decisions. So they're not always wrong. I have to be fair. But on the issue of abortion, they are completely wrong. Planned Parenthood gets, in the last reported year, their last annual report, they reported $792 million in taxpayer funding. That is what is going to be deprived from them, and it should be, by this crazy, big, beautiful bill. But it was the Supreme Court that actually laid the groundwork for states like South Carolina, that's where the Medina case came from, to be able to restrict that funding. Because Planned Parenthood, it's basically been like a slush fund for them.
Yeah.
One, they have been accused of defrauding Medicaid in many states, state after state. In fact, the state of Texas, the DOJ in the state of Texas went after Planned Parenthood because of fraudulent filings in Medicaid, where they file, clients that don't exist, patients that don't exist, services that they didn't provide, and it was found to be over $12 million. They had to pay back $4.9 million. They settled out of court. Planned Parenthood's a corrupt organization, and so
they defrauded them of 12 million, but they only had to pay 4.5 back.
that was the settlement out of court. Had it gone to court, I'm sure they would have gotten
I'm in the
full
wrong
amount.
business.
That's a good deal.
Yeah, I'm in the wrong business.
Well, I know, I know, but this is what
Let
they
me
do.
give you
They keep
4.5
settling
back of
out.
the 12 I told.
Sorry.
But this is who and what they are. I mean, anybody who tries to defend Planned Parenthood, one, they usually know next to nothing about Planned Parenthood. But we're talking about a corrupt organization. The fact that the Senate, listens to a parliamentarian, which is purely an advisory role, which even says on congress.gov that this position is purely a role of advice, and pretending, hiding behind that, and change that 10-year ban, that 10-year defunding to 1, which is ridiculous. That's atrocious. But you've got an organization that spent, in 2024, they spent $70 million trying to elect Kamala Harris and other Democrats. So for the GOP, even if you didn't care about the fact that they kill human beings, which obviously the GOP does, at least the majority of them do, even if you didn't, the fact that Planned Parenthood is your political enemy, they are funding the other side. I don't understand why, especially GOP senators, don't understand how crucial it is to actually deprive them of this funding for 10 years. Planned Parenthood doesn't deserve a dime. And yes, people can go to plenty of other places, taxpayer-funded community health centers, federally qualified health centers. They provide far more health care than Planned Parenthood does, and they serve 34 million more people than Planned Parenthood does. So the lie is that people have nowhere to go. That's a complete lie. Less than 2% of American women of reproductive age even go to Planned Parenthood. So yeah, 98% of other women are getting their care elsewhere. Obviously, people will have somewhere to go.
That's right.
Well, Ryan, this has been great stuff. We're so grateful for the work and the way that you present your story and your materials. For our audience who, if this is the first time they're hearing about you, if they want to learn more about the work that you do, can you give them some places that they can check out some of the stuff that you've done and produced?
Well, the best place to go would be our website, which is radiance.life. That's radiance.life. That's the best one because it doesn't get suppressed like our Facebook page and our Instagram page. But you can find us on social media too: Facebook, Instagram, X. Almost said Twitter, but X. And so we create a lot of content. There are videos, op-eds. There are a lot of graphics. A lot of the research that I touched on, a little bit of that is throughout our op-eds. And you can also find our weekly op-eds on Christian Post and Town Hall.
Great. Well, Ryan Bomberger, thank you so much for all the work that you do for the pro-life cause, and thanks for being a guest today on The Narrative. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Narrative, presented by CCV and produced by Wessler Media. If you found today's episode insightful, leave us a review or rating and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. We're your hosts, Mike Andrews, Aaron Baer, and David Mahan, and we'll see you next time on The Narrative.